Welcome back to the Art of Action Figures. This is just a little add-on to my previous Odds and Ends episode. Just as I finished filming that episode, Hasbro Pulse came through with an unusual Sunday package delivery of my 2 Star Wars Black Series Droideka figures, because I feel like you can't just have one of these. They always come in pairs, so I'm not planning to do a full-length review unless people really want me to. Let me know. The Phantom Menace art department was cooking up some gourmet designs during that period, and this Droideka design is no exception. This is the first time I've ever had a physical Droideka figure, and I'm just thrilled with it. There's definitely some problems. It has some very floppy joints, especially the upper torso, the head, and to some extent the legs have a little bit of looseness, but overall, I'll probably be able to fix that, and it really hasn't diminished just how much fun I've had. To me, this is part of what action figures are all about, being able to bring these designs to life and do things with them that maybe the original creators wouldn't have envisioned, like Droideka in a badass anime pose. And if you're familiar with Black Series YouTuber Mike Case, he always likes to put his Star Wars figures, especially droids, into very suggestive dancing poses, which always cracks me up. I took a couple of shots at that myself, but I'm not going to steal his thunder. Definitely go check his channel out as well. One of the features that was really important to me for this figure to really live up to the hype was being able to transform into ball mode. Now, there have been pre-posed Droideka figurines, statues over the years, but for an action figure line made by the same company as Transformers, I was going to be really disappointed if they didn't even attempt to recreate the ball mode transformation, and I am just so glad that they seem to have pulled out all the stops engineering this droid. There are so many points of articulation that are just completely unique. Basically double hinge elbows with this sort of piston mechanism. It has this retracting neck, kind of like the SHF Trunks Boy from the Future. A few mechanical problems isn't enough to completely ruin an otherwise outstanding figure, especially if it remains intact and just requires maybe a little extra care to pose. Now, I mentioned this is from the company that also makes Transformers, but unlike Transformers, they didn't include any kind of instructions in the box, at least that I could find. So I was kind of left to my own devices to figure out how this is supposed to work in ball mode. I managed to get pretty close to the actual transformation just by fiddling around with the joints and discovering them as I went. But for this video, I also went and looked up some reference material. There was a really useful Reddit post on the Blender subreddit, which I'll link down in the description, of somebody basically doing a 3D animation of the Droideka rolling up. And in that post, they also linked their references. One was the clip from the Phantom Menace where these are first deployed. And the second was something I recognized, one of my all-time favorite movie books, the Episode 1 Visual Dictionary. I just adored having books like this to give you insight into all of these unique designs. And what do you know, on page 22, there is a very useful render of what they call wheel form, which is probably a more accurate name for it since he doesn't technically have 360-degree rolling. There's also a frame-by-frame animation track. On the opposite page, it talks about kind of the deployed combat stance. I think that one's pretty self-explanatory. Now, straight away, there's some intuition here about like what parts of this droid need to turn into a circle. The shape of the head, ability to form an arc with his leg, and then the arc of the spine, if you crunch him forward, can get you part of the way there. But as you can see, it's not quite as tight of a circle as the true wheel mode here. Now, I've found two major mechanical differences between the figure and the CGI model that make it hard for the figure to form such a tight wheel shape. You can see how the tip of the back leg is almost touching the eye and nose sensors, whereas that's quite a lot of distance to cover to get closer to this. First and most significant difference is the distance between the deflector shield flaps and the place where the back leg connects to, I guess, the waist piece, you could call it. On the figure, you'll notice they're right up against each other, which is, from what I can tell, accurate to the deployed combat mode. But I think when the droid goes into wheel mode, the back leg is maybe supposed to slide along this track so that it can essentially get closer to the tip of the head. Now, if you're able to do that with your figure, let me know, but I have not been able to, and it looks like this hinge where the leg is connected is actually just molded into this upper waist piece. So that's really inhibiting the ability to get that tight crunch closed up. The second difference, which is maybe a little bit easier to work around, is you'll notice on the diagram, the sternum plate, which is basically the center of the upper torso, is separated off the spine and angled forward, which I think is causing the head to come forward a little bit. Look at the angle between the two, I guess, parts of the neck here, and compare that to the figure. The figure does actually allow you to bring the sternum forward just a little and get that angle closer to the diagram. The problem is it causes the head to pull forward off of the spine, and there doesn't really seem to be a way to have both back of the head running along the spine like we have here and the sternum pulled forward off the spine. Now, what I'm going to do is walk you through top to bottom how to get as close to this transformation as we can just by moving the parts that are supposed to move. And then I'll introduce a couple of little tweaks that maybe go off script a little bit, but I think improve the overall wheel shape at the end of it. When in combat mode, the neck should be extended. The shield flaps should be open. The legs should all be kind of slightly bent, basically holding the waist at around the height of the knees. The spine should be fairly straight, although easier said than done with how loose my upper torso joint is. So what I usually end up doing is propping up the torso by just resting the elbow on the upper leg there. First thing you'll notice, the neck is mostly retracted when in ball mode. It's maybe extended a little bit, which can help the effect, but we're going to try to adhere to that. And next, let's go ahead and work out the arms. You can see there's quite a lot going on here, but basically this little like shoulder pad ends up here. So I have to use this collarbone joint. And to use that collarbone joint, you have to pull the sternum forward. So we're going to do that, even though I know it kind of makes the head pull away from the spine, which is not really what we want to happen. but that allows us to push the collarbone joint, or you can think of this as the butterfly joints, I guess, if you really want to. That allows you to pull those back into that sort of shape. Now, this piece here with all of the hoses running to it is this part on the droid's arm. And so what actually happens here is the tips of the blasters fold up and kind of like wrap around this collarbone, and I'll show you how that happens. So you just want to carefully tuck and twist, being careful not to pull on the hoses too much. And you can see how the blaster is kind of wrapped around the collarbone piece. And that's pretty much what we've got going on here. We're going to repeat with the other arm so you can maybe see it from another angle. We are folding the lower elbow joint, twisting the bicep joint, and just gently, without pulling on the hoses, tucking the blasters around that collarbone piece. And if you pulled the collarbone forward while doing that, you just want to push it back again so that it's like that. All right. Now, we'll talk about the torso, but real quick, let's get these shield flaps out of the way. So you just go ahead and close those. They're just on a hinge. The upper torso hinge should remain pretty straight, and so we actually want to bend the lower torso hinge, and it can be a little tricky to do it. That is most of the way there. Anchor ourselves at the base of the waist here. We can see the spine going up like it should. The head is sitting a little bit away from the spine, but we can address that in a moment. Finally, the most important part to complete the circle, the back leg needs to form an arc continuous with the head and the spine. And we're pretty close. And then the front legs are supposed to kind of overlap the back leg. Kind of like this. But you can see the knee is also really close to the chin. So something's not quite right yet. A couple of problems you can see. First of all, the arms are supposed to be horizontal, but you can't really do that with the figure, because if you try to use, there is a swivel here, but if you try to use it, these blasters will no longer fit around the full width of the butterfly piece because of the hoses. And so if you want the arms to be horizontal, what I find works well enough is simply positioning them like this. It's not exactly like the diagram. You can see the Blaster 1 and Blaster 2, but still looks pretty good from most angles. Now, the biggest challenge is with bringing the sternum forward. It brings the head off the spine, and you could just not use that joint and keep the sternum connected to the spine, and that looks okay. But again, we're nowhere near this tight of a circle. And so what I've found, one last step that brings this together, is actually to take the head off these two cylinder hinges here. Go ahead and close the back one. And what we're going to do is just connect the back port to the front hinge. And that actually allows us to bring the head a good bit further forward than we were before. And if you bring those front legs up, and you can see we're very close to getting the toe to touch the nose. To get the last little bit covered, what we can do is extend the neck just a little bit. And with those last adjustments, this is about as close to the actual wheel mode as I've been able to get with the Black Series Droideka figure. Now what I'm going to do is transform back into combat mode, and then I'll repeat the transformation into ball mode one more time, and we'll wrap it up. All right, we can start by replacing the head. Attach the back hinge first. You just push down till you hear a little click, and then line up the front hinge. Apply downward pressure until that clicks, and it helps if you support from the bottom of the sternum. There we go. Now I'm going to straighten the spine, which is just this lower hinge needs to be angled back. Head's in good working order. We can extend the neck, swivel down the arms, extend the front legs, extend the back legs, open the shield flaps, and some fine adjustments. And we are back into combat mode, back to ball mode. So I'm going to close the shield flaps to get them out of the way. Fold the arms up. Let's go ahead and fold the front legs. You can really do these steps in any order. And this is the trickiest part probably, is folding this lower hinge. It just really is stiff on my figure, as you can see. It takes a little bit of pressure. Then I'm going to do my trick with the neck joints here. I'll move the front hinge to the back socket on the head, just to bring the head a bit further forward and a bit closer to that toe. Oh, and then of course we want to swivel the arms up. And there we go. That is your Droideka in wheel mode, ball mode, ready to roll into action. With that, I will leave you until my next review. I may take a little bit of a break from videos. I don't have too much in the way of shipments arriving in the month of June. So videos might slow down just a little bit for that month, but should be back to, I don't know, I try to create one once every 2 weeks or so. Sometimes I have a little bit more time, like this weekend, and I can do little extra special tidbits like this. But thanks for stopping by. I hope you've enjoyed this look at the Hasbro Star Wars Black Series Droideka, or Destroyer Droid, action figure and its transformation into wheel mode. I've really been enjoying this figure, and it is definitely a contender for my top 10 of 2024. If you'd like to see more Star Wars, Dragon Ball, Street Fighter, or anime figures, you can check out my channel, where I'm starting to build up a back catalog of long-form videos. You can also follow me on Instagram under my alternate username account. It's Pletho79. Mostly post photos or outtakes from my videos over there, but also some little one-off things. The other day I posted a desperate attempt to get Medicom's attention so that they will consider change one or two of the hairstyles on the upcoming Mafex Rogue figure. I know I'm not the only one who's just baffled by the decision to give her 3 identical pre-posed, windswept hairstyles. People would want to pose the figure just standing indoors or anything like that. This has been The Art of Action Figures. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.